Welcome back to Bianchi Law Talk. Another episode every Sunday, 5 o'clock. Usually hitting the top crime cases that are going on throughout the country, the real true crime cases, many of which I discuss when I'm hosting at the Law and Crime Network, which I will be tomorrow from 12:30 to 4. Welcome, Mark D'Annunzio. So, Mark, I'm going to go on a little bit of a sidebar here, but it's something that's been bothering me for a while, and I've wanted to talk about it. And being in Mass today at church, the pastors start kind of talking about this. So I want to ask questions about faith in the law. Is it so bad to be a faith-based person and be in the law? Well, I have to tell you from my own personal experience, I believe that my faith, which happens to be Catholic, very much informed my decisions, especially when I was a prosecutor. And I think in a very positive way. I came from a very positive Catholic environment at Providence College, and particularly Seton Hall Prep. Where we learn to put our faith into action. And so many times I found myself consulting with my faith, which as a prosecutor, you're dealing with punishment and deterrence, which is a great value to human society, but also something that needs to be tempered with compassion and mercy. Asking the question every day, as the pastor was talking about today, what would Jesus do if he were in the same situation? Now, I know that this conversation is going to be very, very hot button kind of issue because people don't like to talk about faith in government. They tend to want to separate it. But here are some talking points that I've had about this for a long time. The first is the founding fathers of this country never expected the country to be a faithless society. Quite to the contrary, in every document from the Declaration of Independence to our Constitution, and even our money that we carry around in our pockets says, "In God we trust." It was never meant to be a godless society, but rather one in which anyone can come to the shores of this country and from sea to shining sea and beyond, be able to practice their religious faith unencumbered by an institution of state religion or being persecuted for the reasons of whatever your particular faith may be. In other words, it's meant to be a society filled with godlike religions, whatever religion that may be, and the government is not to discriminate and establish a state religion based on one religion versus another. So this is something where I find that in today's environment, especially when I'm talking in the media, that if you talk about God in any way, shape, or form, somehow you are the boogeyman if you are in government service. In fact, to a point where I wear a crucifix ring on one of my hands, and I was trying a case as a prosecutor, and there was actually an argument that the defense lawyer said he was going to make to have me remove my ring because it was communicating, quote unquote, something to the jury. I said to him, knock yourself out because that ring's not coming off. And if I got to go all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States Supreme Court, so be it. And if I'm instructed to do it, then I won't try the case. I refuse to remove an aspect of who I am so deep in the flesh of my person. And if the man's world has to succumb to God's world, then so be it. That'll be the way it was. The lawyer never pressed the issue, but I was really kind of shocked that the argument would even be made. And I kind of wondered to myself, would they make this argument if I were of a different faith, or if I wasn't Catholic, if I was a different Christian denomination, or if I was Muslim, or if I was Hindu, or if I was Jewish, would they be making the same thing? And I guess we can only speculate about that. But the reason why this populated into my mind recently is because this bleeding over of an anti-religious fervor, and listen, if you're an atheist or agnostic, knock yourself out. That's your choice. That's your path. I have no problem with that. I don't discriminate upon you for that. I don't look down upon you for that. But don't look down upon me for my faith is where I'm coming at. And recently, I've seen some things that have been really amazing to me. For example, Catholics are now more and more being put on, with all due respect, I guess the good word, the crucible, if you will, during these confirmation hearings as to what their Catholicism means in terms of their ability to fulfill their government functions. And these are some people that have had very high-level, prolific careers. One happens to be a female, I forget her first name, it may be Catherine, but her last name is Barrett, and she was under contention for being a United States Supreme Court justice, and right from the giddy up, despite the fact that she's had an unbelievable career, very well regarded, highly esteemed person, people started talking about her faith and that her faith was a disqualifying factor in her being a Supreme Court justice. Now, the thing that kills me about some of these conversations is we've gotten to a point where in order to not discriminate, we discriminate. And I thought it was really unfair that before the woman even had an opportunity to be able to defend herself, that her reputation and career was sullied merely because she was a Catholic. I thought that was outrageous. And just recently, I believe it was on the Federal Court of Appeals, there was a nominee that was up, and one of the senators, United States senators, started questioning them about their involvement with the Knights of Columbus. Well, I'm a Knight of Columbus, and I wouldn't even begin to have thought that was something that in my confirmation hearing as a prosecutor could have come up as to somehow making me disqualified. Now, I get the idea that this surrounds the abortion issue in most instances, and perhaps the gay issue as well, because the Catholic Church has very strong stances about abortion and being gay. But so do other non-denominational Christian churches, and so does the Jewish community, and so does the Muslim community and the Hindu community. And I just don't suspect that with many of the other faiths, other than being Catholic in particular, that those questions would have been asked in that fashion. Now, do I think it's completely fair to ask what their opinions are, to try to ferret out what their stances are on those particular issues? Yes, I do think it's fair. But to sit there and say because the person is of one particular faith, therefore they should really be looked at in a very suspect way, I think is very suspect. So I know it's controversial, but I've been dealing with this for a number of years myself. And I just don't, I see Harris has got a question. So that is dicey proposition that flies directly in the face of our Constitution. I'm not sure what you mean by that, Harris. But necessarily that's the point. I think what you may be trying to say is that when I took the role on as prosecutor, while I may be a Catholic and the Catholic Church is generally against the death penalty, does not mean that I would abdicate my responsibility as a prosecutor to seek the death penalty in a case that I find that is appropriate. So, I mean, listen, Harris, it go down a slippery slope when you start going through the religious tenets of each religion and juxtaposing it against quote unquote the Constitution, and therefore saying, well, you're disqualified because your faith believes that, or you're disqualified because your faith believes that. I find it to be highly discriminatory and offensive that simply because you are a member of a particular class, that is in this particular instance, 2 instances of Catholics, that somehow people think that you should be disqualified from public service. I find that to be the height of discrimination, and that a far greater slippery slope than any theoretical things that you can think of. Judge the individual by their character, their background, their integrity, what they've done in their career. And if you want to ask issues about what their position is about this, that, or the other thing, that's fine. So I'll get controversial already. I see a number of people already posting here, and Julio and Michelle and Lisa has joined us. I'm sorry. I just think that as a member of the Catholic faith, I think that has inspired me, not that you have to be a Catholic to be this way, but it's inspired me to be a better public servant when I wasn't even a better person, as I'm sure every faith inspires people to be. So if I don't think it's imperative to look at your religious tenets in order to judge you as a person, I don't know necessarily whether you should look at, by the way, the Catholic Church. Most American Catholics don't even follow all the aspects of the Catholic Church. The fact that it has a doctrine doesn't necessarily mean that that person individually believes in it. I know many Catholics, for example, who are gay, and I know many Catholics, for example, who believe in free choice. So I think it's an individual thing. Well, let me know. Obviously, it's going to be controversial. Thank you all for joining. Next Sunday, 5 o'clock, Bianchi Law Talk. If you get an opportunity, I'd love for you to subscribe on my YouTube channel. You know, Mark, on Bianchi Law Talk, you bring up a good point here. John Kennedy was elected to the presidency in 1960. Now, the Ku Klux Klan, which was obviously mainly against blacks, but it was also Jews and Catholics. Let's not forget about that. There's only been one Catholic that's ever been elected as a president in the United States, and that is John F. Kennedy. Probably the greatest religion that was discriminated upon in the Founding Fathers' days, if you will, going forward, was the Catholic Church. There has been significant prejudice against the Catholics in this country. Maryland was created as a state that was supposed to be a haven for, the Catholics. So your point on the president, John F. Kennedy, is well taken, and I suspect it'll be quite a while before we see another Catholic in contention seriously. Julio Barones, if we were to say the same about Islam, it would be scandalous. The hypocrisy is unbelievable, and that's kind of my point. We could go through every single religion and we can pull out doctrinally something that may be antithetical to what people believe they think the Constitution says. And ours, back to your point, there are many people that don't believe the Constitution says that it protects a woman's right to an abortion. I'm just saying that is a constitutional interpretation that is subjective based upon whatever, you may think in terms of constitutional construction, strict construction or not. But I agree with you, Julio. If you were ever to say something like that about a Muslim, you would be run out of town. If you were to say, why you're a Muslim, you believe this, therefore you're disqualified from service. Harris, I'm going to try to get, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to see what you wrote here. It's long, so unfortunately, you guys can check out Harris's commentary there. It's a little too long for me to read and probably respond to, although I would love to. And I will, and when we get off, hey guys, thanks a lot for watching. That's just something I just want to put out there. Typically, I'm talking about the cases, but I thought this was an important issue. Discrimination in any form against any group, I don't think is right. Okay, see you next week.